Growing up back on the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, we had all sorts of great long-running series. That's where these series all began, but it seems that it kind of died in the HD era. So here I want to look back on 5 great long-running series that I played back in the day that have just become dead and defunct, and I want them to be revived. And I definitely do think that's with the sub as you come and you join my party and you level on up with me. Thank you so much for your sub, your like, and your hype. It helps me out a ton. And now let's go on in and look at the past of these great RPG series that need a good revival. First up, we have the Wild Arms series, spanning from the PlayStation to the PS2 over to the PSP. Gosh, of all the series on this list to end, this one could quite possibly be the biggest shame. Although there is a spiritual successor, Armed Fantasia, that's in the works since, Sony just refuses to revive this one. All of the games in this series are connected, taking place on the Wild West themed and dying planet of Filgaia. And the first 3 games do feature a scenario system, puzzle-based dungeons, and a unique crest graph magical system for spell creation. They are wild rides through the Wild West, but they take a turn in the 4th and the 5th games, because here, the battle system just changes up drastically over to the hex system, which I love. Here you actually attack the hexes rather than the enemies, and it's so much fun to do. I really do wish that more games emulated that style, or that the series, just kept on going with it because it was groundbreaking. They even went so far as to introduce a class system in the 5th game, which was greatly expanded on in the PSP spin-off, Wild Arms XF. A turn-based strategy RPG in the same similar vein as something like Final Fantasy Tactics. But then, after that, it just kind of died off, with no fanfare whatsoever. There was never a bad game that just killed it off. In fact, the final mainline game was a 10th anniversary celebration title, talking about all the previous entries and hyping them all up. There was literally no indication that the series was going to end, and then it just suddenly did. It's such a shame. And a lot of series died with the PS3 hit, and this was one of the worst casualties. Next up, the Suikoden series, spanning the PlayStation to the PS2 over to the DS and the PSP. This one, just like the Wild Arms series, also died with the PS3. Thanks HD graphics, we love you. But anyway, while the Wild Arms games did take place on Filgaia with a loose connection, Suikoden is a whole different ballgame, because these all take place in the same world and around the same time period, just in different countries. So it has some similarities with Wild Arms, but a lot of similarities with the Trails series too. In fact, there's many recurring characters that continually appear throughout the series as they travel between the different countries. I remember whenever I first heard about it, I thought that it might be a little bit overwhelming because, there's 108 characters that I'd have to recruit, but I ended up loving it. The first game is on the shorter side, while the second one is one of the greatest games ever made, an absolute masterpiece in world building and storytelling, with a villain who can go toe-to-toe with the likes of Sephiroth or Kefka. The third, though, kind of dropped the ball with their Trinity Sight system and a weird tag team battle mechanic. But much of that was rectified in the 4th installment, which I quite enjoyed. But there are some issues with it too, such as a 4-person battle party instead of 6, being set in an island nation, so sailing abounds, and then the dorky-looking hero who needs a kick-me sign attached to his back as he runs around in his little booty shorts. And it doesn't help that he's named after a makeup company either. Come on, whose idea was it to name the kid Laszlo? But the 5th game, what a gem that is. It harkens back to the 2nd in its world building, and it's one of the longest games that I've ever played. The storytelling is masterclass, and it's something that you can really sink your teeth into. There was also a spin-off over on the PSP, which was not released here, but we did get a translation patch, so now those of us in the West can enjoy it. But again, much like the aforementioned Wild Arms, Suikoden died right at the height of its popularity. Though Konami is giving all of its fans a ray of hope with their HD remaster collection of 1 and 2, so hopefully one day I will be able to say that Suikoden is no longer defunct and a true 6th game, not a mobile game, is on the horizon. Next up at number 3, we have the Lunar series, spanning from the Sega CD over to the PlayStation and even the PSP and the DS. Lunar came and went like the wind. I know that it first came over on the Sega, but my first exposure to it was the complete collection games on the original PlayStation. And I just fell in love with them there, with the ethereal music, charming characters, captivating storyline, and tactical turn-based battles, along with some of the most gorgeous animated cutscenes and songs that I've ever heard in gaming. They were just absolutely fantastic, and working designs really did the collection justice, with all sorts of added goodies that I still have today, like the Punch Puppet and Lucia's Pendant. And I know that there was a Game Gear Gaiden called Lunar Walking School that was only released in Japan, and it was later remade for the Sega Saturn as Lunar Magic School, but unfortunately that languished in Japan, but there is a translation patch available for the Sega Game Gear game, but not the Saturn game. Then, a teeny tiny ray of hope was given to us with Lunar Dragon Song, going to be released on the Nintendo DS. Only, that game was completely bastardized, and the original team actually had nothing at all to do with the development. Therefore, not only is it a bad Lunar game, but it's also one of the worst RPGs of all time. So, rather than going out on a high note like Wild Arms and Suikoden, the series just fell into obscurity. But similar to the previously mentioned Suikoden, there is a Lunar collection out now featuring the first 2 games, so the hope is now on the horizon that they might expand the series and give us some more good Lunars. Next up, we have the Mother series, released on the NES, SNES, and Game Boy Advance. Don't come at me with actual facts here about the mastermind behind the series. I don't want to hear facts. I just want to dream for a second, you know? A boy can dream, can't he? I first heard about this series in an article in Nintendo Power where they were talking about upcoming releases and saying that it was going to get released in America. And I held on to hope for that for years. And I just forgot about it until Earthbound hit for the SNES. I remember reading all about it and the advertisements about how the game stunk. But it was kind of weird, and my brother, ever the weirdo, really wanted it, and he got it for Christmas, and we both loved it. So I had high hopes when just a couple of years later, Mother 3 was announced for the Game Boy Advance. But unfortunately, it was never released here, and it took quite the Herculean effort to even actually get it translated for an English audience. And for whatever reason, Nintendo still just kind of seems dead set against continuing what are their most traditional RPG properties, which is such a shame, because although it might have been unpopular at one time, it has definitely achieved cult status now. And I think that like a Mother 4 would just sell like hotcakes. Thankfully though, we have been blessed with a plethora of Earthbound-inspired indie games, including the so-called Mother 4, which has now been rebranded as Oddity, but we haven't heard hide nor hair of that in years, so that's probably just about as dead in the water as Earthbound itself. And finally, we have the Glory of Hercules series, released on the NES, SNES, and Nintendo DS. You might be forgiven if you've never heard of this series before, or maybe you have, but you just think it's because of that craptastic game over in the Nintendo DS. And well, yeah, it really sucked that the only game in the series that they saw fit to officially localize was easily the worst one. There were 5 different games before that, and all of them pretty frickin' quality. The first 2 games were released on the NES and were pretty much Dragon Warrior clones, with the first one being a 1-for-1 reskin, but just kind of like set in ancient Greece where you played as Hercules, and then the second game was a Dragon Warrior 2 clone, where instead of the Prince of Midenhall, you're Hercules, instead of the Prince of Cannock, you're a centaur, and instead of the Princess of Moonbrook, you have a living statue. But whereas Dragon Warrior 2, wasn't like the best game ever, Glory of Hercules 2 is seriously one of the best RPGs ever released on the poor little NES. There was even a side story off on the Game Boy too that of course, we never got. But the third and fourth games released on the SNES broke away from the Dragon Quest molds and really became their own thing, with the third game allowing you to have 5 party members, kind of like in Final Fantasy IV, but then the fourth game really became one of the most gorgeous games on the entire system. Unfortunately though, it died when the PlayStation hit, and it was only unceremoniously revived with the first American release being for the aforementioned Nintendo DS game. And why did they have to darken our door with this one? Why couldn't we have gotten the second game, or the fourth game, or even the Game Boy game for God's sakes? The subpar graphics and that weird storyline involving throwing yourself off of a cliff, along with a ton of stylus controls, just ruined it. But man,
what I wouldn't give for a fully translated Glory of Hercules collection, or even better, a Glory of Hercules 5. So that's it for 5 defunct series that definitely do need to return into the modern era. I have to ask you now, what 5 series do you want to see returned? Let me know in the comments and let's all talk and chat about it. And also, have you ever played any of these games? Let me know what you think of them. Let's talk about that too. And if you like this video, please be sure to check out the first part. There is a link to it over in the pinned comment and video description. Be sure to check that one out and also leave a comment and a like. Helps me out a ton. Have a good day.